I'm Maribel Crane, 35 years old, a marketing manager in Savannah, Georgia. People who know me say I'm independent to a fault. I've spent most of my life proving I could build something out of nothing, my career, my apartment, my peace. But the truth is, no matter how strong you think you are, a single message can make your whole world shake. That morning, I was leading a campaign meeting, laser-focused on the numbers glowing on the projector. My phone buzzed against the conference table. Normally, I would have ignored it, but the name flashing across the screen. Serena pulled my eyes down. My little sister. The one everyone still called the baby, even though she was 18. The message was short, almost barked in capital letters. Send me $2,800 for prom. My chest tightened. I stared at the glowing numbers, the cost of a dress and a limo for one night. My fingers moved on their own. Earn it yourself, I typed back, jaw clenched. I thought that would be the end of it. Maybe she would sulk. Maybe she'd call me selfish. Instead, a new text arrived seconds later, this time from my parents' number. I read it once, then again, my pulse hammering louder with each word, pay or get out of this house. I wasn't even living with them anymore, but the words landed like a commandment, stripping me of every ounce of dignity I had fought to build. I sat frozen as the meeting dissolved around me, colleagues filing out while I stared at the phone in my hand, my family's threat echoing inside me. That night, lying in the dark, I pressed my lips together and whispered into the silence, cancel, cancel, cancel everything. The words from my parents stayed with me long after the glow of the phone faded. They had always known how to turn love into leverage. But this time, their threat cut so deep it dragged me backward, into the years I'd tried hardest to bury. I was 17 when Serena was born. My mother called her a miracle, a second chance after the hard years of raising me. I remember standing in the hospital room, the baby wrapped in pink, while relatives cooed and my mother's face shone with pride I had never seen directed at me. By then, I was already working nights at a diner off Abercorn Street, saving for college textbooks, handing my paycheck straight to the cashier at the bookstore. Meanwhile, Serena grew up in a cloud of ribbons and glitter. For her 10th birthday, they rented out a carriage ride in the historic district and bought a cake so tall it barely fit through the door. The party cost $2,000, money I couldn't imagine spending on anything, let alone a child's birthday. When I asked for $50 to go on a school trip the same year, my mother snapped, "We can't afford it." Maribel, I stayed home that weekend, watching old movies in silence while Serena twirled in her princess dress. It wasn't just the money. It was the way every decision bent toward her happiness. New phones when she misplaced hers. Weekend trips to Tybee Island, paid for on credit. I learned quickly not to ask for much. My father would only say, "She's our second chance to get it right." The words lodged in my chest like a stone. I pushed forward anyway, shift after shift, class after class, while Serena floated above consequences, crowned in my parents' devotion. And now, 18 years later, she was still demanding, still sure the world owed her something. While my refusal made me the villain, the pattern had always been there. I had just chosen not to see it. By the time I turned 30, I thought I had finally reached a place where I could breathe. I had a steady salary, a one-bedroom apartment on the edge of Forsyth Park, and the kind of stability I'd worked a decade to earn. My parents still lived in the same house on the outskirts of Savannah, its porch sagging a little more each year, the mortgage supposedly nearly paid off. That was when I made a decision that now feels like the biggest mistake of my life. I opened a joint family account, telling myself it would make things easier. Instead of scrambling to wire money whenever they called, I could simply transfer funds and let them use the account for groceries, utilities, or unexpected repairs. My father thanked me quietly. My mother said it would take so much stress off their shoulders. I believed her, in the beginning. I didn't think twice. A few hundred here, 1,000 there. I was too busy running campaigns and chasing deadlines to study every line of the bank statements. When my mother texted that the electric bill had spiked, I covered it. When Dad said the roof needed patching, I sent more. Each transfer felt like doing the right thing. But looking back, there were cracks I ignored. Serena's jewelry, the sparkling pendant she wore to Thanksgiving, though she had no job, the vague messages from my mother. It's been a rough month, without further detail. The time Serena casually mentioned a planner helping with her prom months before the demand even came. I laughed it off, thinking maybe she was exaggerating. I wanted to trust them. I wanted to believe that after years of struggle, I was finally able to lift some weight from their backs. But the truth is, I never asked questions. I gave, and they took. That was the rhythm we lived in. And I mistook it for love. Only now, staring at the ultimatum on my phone, did I start to wonder what that account had really been paying for all these years, and whether I had been the only one blind enough to believe it was for survival. The night after their ultimatum, I thought silence would give me distance. I turned my phone face down on the counter, tried to drown myself in work, in cooking, in anything that wasn't their words still echoing in my head. But silence didn't last. My phone lit up again, Serena's name flashing across the screen. Against my better judgment, I answered. Her voice hit me like a slap shrill, high-pitched, dripping with fury. "You're so selfish, Maribel," she snapped. "It's just prom. Why can't you help me? You make good money. What's $2,800 to you?" I gripped the phone tighter. "You're 18. Plenty of kids work part-time jobs. Save up, pay for their own dances. Try it." She scoffed so loudly I had to hold the phone away. "You don't get it. I deserve this." And then she hung up, leaving nothing but a sharp buzz in my ear and a pit in my stomach. Minutes later, another text came. This one from my mother. "Pay for your sister's prom or don't bother calling yourself part of this family." A moment later, my father's message followed. "Do the right thing. Maribel." The words pulled me under like a riptide. Do the right thing. I had been doing the right thing my entire life. At 16, I begged for $50 to join a school trip and heard my mother snap. "We can't afford it." Meanwhile, Serena was handed $200 for concert tickets without hesitation. When my phone cracked, I taped it together for months. Serena lost hers and got a new model the same week. It wasn't about the money anymore. It was about the way I had been measured against her from the moment she was born, and always found wanting. Every request I made was a burden. Every demand she uttered was a right. I stood in my kitchen, my phone vibrating with their accusations, and felt the old ache rise again. The difference this time was sharp, undeniable. I wasn't a teenager anymore. I didn't have to listen, but their voices still clawed at me, pulling me back into the same endless fight I thought I'd escaped. The next afternoon, just as I was trying to catch up on emails, a sharp ping landed in my inbox. It wasn't from a client. The subject line read, "Large Transaction Alert." My pulse quickened as I clicked it open. The family account my account had been drained of $5,000 that very morning. Not a bill payment, not groceries, just gone. For a moment, I sat frozen in my chair, staring at the figure. 5,000. That was nearly 2 months of rent, a semester of textbooks back when I was in school, the amount I used to dream of having saved. My chest tightened as the realization spread through me. This wasn't about Serena's prom at all. This was something larger, darker, threaded through every vague request and every hurried excuse my parents had fed me. I dialed Serena's number, my fingers stiff. She answered on the third ring, her tone already sharp. "Do you know anything about a withdrawal?" I asked, forcing my voice to stay calm. 5,000 just left the family account. "Do you know where it went?" A pause, then a brittle laugh. "Why are you always so suspicious? I don't know." "Ask Mom and Dad." "Serena, I pressed, my throat burning. This isn't a game. $5,000 is not nothing. Did you authorize anything? Her voice went cold. You're overreacting. It's probably for bills or something. Stop acting like a detective. Then the line went dead. I stared at my phone, the silence heavier than her words. I had heard Serena lie before small things, easy things, ones she never had to pay for, but this was different. This felt rehearsed, evasive, as though she knew more than she would ever admit. I couldn't sit still. I pushed away from my desk and paced the length of my apartment. My parents had threatened to disown me over a prom dress. Yet $5,000 had vanished without explanation. The math didn't add up. None of it did. That was when I thought of Ellen Ward. She worked down the hall at my firm, a lawyer with a reputation for precision. We had shared lunches, swapped stories, even laughed about our parents now and then. She was steady, reliable, the kind of person who could cut through fog when I couldn't see straight. I grabbed my phone and typed quickly, "Can we talk? It's urgent." Her reply came in less than a minute. "Come by my office tonight. I'll stay late." I exhaled, a sharp, trembling sound. For the first time, I wasn't just doubting. I was ready to know the truth. The morning after Ellen handed me the stack of statements, I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop open and my coffee untouched. The numbers still floated in my mind, over $100,000 drained in 4 years. So many transfers disguised as unexpected expenses. I had proof now, and proof left no room for excuses. My hands barely trembled as I logged into the bank portal. Closing the joint account took less than 10 minutes, though each click felt monumental. At the final confirmation screen, I hesitated only once. Then I pressed the button and watched the page refresh. The balance sealed away. When the email arrived in my parents' inbox, it was only one sentence long. The account is closed. No more money. The storm came quickly. First Serena, calling nonstop until I finally let the phone connect. Her voice tore through the line. "You can't do this. We need that account. You're ruining everything. Need it for what I asked quietly." Another prom planner. More shopping sprees. Her breath hitched, then turned into a scream. "You're tearing this family apart, and just like before." She hung up before I could reply. Not long after, my mother's messages rolled in, paragraphs of accusations. "How dare you accuse us? We sacrificed everything for you. We only wanted to survive. Survive. On designer trips, boutiques, and secret mortgages." My father's text was shorter, but it carried the same weight. "Maribel, think about what you're doing to us." I stared at the screen, the words blurring until they became meaningless shapes. Then, without hesitation, I opened my contacts, scrolled through the familiar names, and pressed block. First Serena, then my mother. Finally, my father. The silence that followed was suffocating and liberating at once. For the first time, there was no buzzing, no demands, no guilt seeping through the screen, just stillness, broken only by my own heartbeat. It felt like the first real act of independence I had ever taken, not moving out at 17, not paying my own way through college, but this choosing to cut the cord they had wrapped around my life for decades. The morning after Ellen slid the final stack of records across her desk, I woke with the decision already burning in my chest. My parents had siphoned more than $100,000 over 4 years, hiding debts, feeding Serena's whims, covering a second mortgage I never knew existed. I couldn't carry it for them anymore. By 9 o'clock, I was on the phone with the bank. My voice barely wavered as I gave the instructions: close the joint account, freeze access, issue final statements. Each confirmation felt like snapping a chain that had been clamped around me for years. When it was done, I stared at the silence of the line, my own breath shaky but steady. I drafted the email slowly, choosing every word with care. The joint account is closed. I know about the $100,000. There will be no more money. I signed my name without flourish, hit send, and closed my laptop. The storm came within the hour. Serena was first, her call exploding through my phone. "You can't do this!" she screamed, her voice a mix of panic and rage. "We need that account." "You've ruined everything." I held the phone to my ear but didn't raise my voice. "Need it for what? More designer dresses?" I asked quietly. She sputtered, cursed, then hung up. Next came my mother's texts, long, frantic, shifting between guilt and accusation. "How dare you accuse us that money was survival? You are cruel, ungrateful." My father followed with a short, cold line. "Think about what you're doing to this family." I sat on the couch, their words flashing in bubbles across my screen, and felt something strange calm. My thumb hovered, then pressed through the settings. One by one, I blocked their numbers. The screen went dark. Finally quiet. It was the first silence I had ever chosen for myself. For the first time in my life, their voices couldn't reach me. A week later, I drove across Savannah with the folder of records on the passenger seat. The closer I got to my parents' house, the heavier it felt, as if the weight of every number inside pressed down on me. Their porch sagged more than I remembered, the paint peeling, the lawn unkempt. It should have looked like home. But all I saw was the place where my silence had been taken for granted. Inside, the air was thick with unease. My mother sat on the couch, arms crossed, eyes sharp. My father hovered near the window, jaw clenched. Serena lounged in the armchair, her face hidden behind her phone. No one offered me a greeting. I placed the folder on the coffee table and spread out the statements. "I know everything," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. $100,000 gone. A second mortgage, credit cards maxed, payments to boutiques and planners. "You lied to me." My mother's face crumpled, not with shame but indignation. "How dare you dig into our private business? This is family." "Family," I met her gaze. "I thought I was helping with bills, keeping you afloat. Instead, you funded her lifestyle." I gestured toward Serena, who still hadn't looked up. My father stepped forward, his voice sharp. "You don't understand. Debts pile up. You were supposed to help us." "I did," I snapped, "for years, and you squandered it." Tears streaked my mother's cheeks. "You're selfish. We did this for her, for Serena's future." I turned to my sister. "And what do you have to say?" She shifted but stayed silent, scrolling, as if my anger were just background noise. Something inside me hardened. "You abandoned me first," I said, gathering the papers back into the folder. "Don't ever forget that." Their voices rose behind me, a mix of fury and pleading, but I walked out without looking back. The slam of the door was the only answer I had left. Months slipped by in silence. I didn't hear from my parents or Serena, though sometimes I caught myself reaching for the phone before remembering the numbers I had blocked. Life settled into a new rhythm work, quiet evenings, mornings where I woke without dread of another demand. Then one afternoon, my cousin Leah called. We hadn't spoken in a while, and her voice carried a hesitation I recognized. "Mary Belle," she said softly, "I thought you should know. Your parents filed for bankruptcy." I sat at my kitchen table, listening as she explained, the house in the suburbs, the one they always claimed was nearly paid off, had been foreclosed. Movers had taken the furniture. Neighbors had watched in silence as my mother wept on the lawn. My father stood rigid beside her, his face blank, as if he had already surrendered to the collapse. They had moved into a cramped apartment on the other side of town. Leah hesitated before adding, "Serena's working now. At a clothing store in the mall, folding shirts, running the register." The image came easily, my sister, who once demanded $1,000 dresses, standing under fluorescent lights, smoothing cotton t-shirts for strangers. It didn't fill me with triumph the way I once imagined it might. Instead, there was a strange mix of sorrow and relief, like watching a storm finally break after years of clouds. I thanked Leah for telling me and hung up. For a long while, I sat in silence, staring at the worn edge of my table. Part of me ached for them, for the ruin of what they had built, but another part felt lighter, unshackled. They had made their choices, and life had delivered its own verdict. I poured myself a glass of water and stood by the window, the city humming beyond the glass. For the first time, the chaos wasn't mine to carry. The apartment in Savannah had always been mine in name, but in those months after everything unraveled, it began to feel like mine in truth. The quiet became a companion, not a punishment. Each morning, I woke without bracing for a message demanding money. My phone rested still on the nightstand, no longer a weapon turned against me. I started therapy on the advice of a colleague, walking into a sunlit office on Broughton Street once a week. At first, I stumbled over my words, ashamed of how easily I had been used. But slowly, I learned to untangle guilt from love, obligation from loyalty. My therapist helped me see that boundaries weren't cruelty, they were survival. Piece by piece, I rebuilt myself. I stopped replaying my mother's accusations, my father's sharp commands, Serena's shrill demands. Instead, I poured that energy into work I cared about, into friendships that gave back, into evenings that belonged wholly to me. On weekends, I found small rituals, reading in the square, walking the riverfront, letting the humid Savannah air wrap around me without weight. Some days, I still thought of them, of what they had lost, of how Serena now stood behind a counter instead of standing on a pedestal. But the ache dulled, replaced by something steadier, the knowledge that I had finally chosen myself. One quiet Sunday morning, I carried a mug of coffee onto my balcony. The sun spilled over the rooftops, the streets below alive but distant. My phone sat beside me on the table, dark and silent. I breathed in, slow and sure. They told me to leave the house. What they never understood was that I had already built my own,